All right, folks, this is the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this every week. Usually we do it on Thursdays, but we were just too busy last week and I was traveling. And so we're doing it on Friday and excited to have everybody here. We want to talk about a lot of news this week. There's going to be a lot more next week, too. Eric and I just got off a briefing with a big player in the industry, and my head is swimming a little bit with some of the technical details that we just went through, but some things that are very significant. But that's okay. And actually, we're going to probably move a little faster this week than usual because I think everybody's been busy this week. But I'm Brett Kinsella. I'm the founder of Synthedia and VoiceBot.ai. We do the Generative AI News Rundown each week with my colleague, Eric Schwartz, who is the head writer of VoiceBot.ai. And so we're the people who hopefully try to get you up or keep you up to speed on what's going on, what's important, and how to interpret it. Eric, how are you doing today?
Good. Yeah. A lot of important stuff to cover very quickly.
Absolutely. Okay. So just a couple quick things for everybody here. If you are on LinkedIn or YouTube watching live, just post. Let us know who you are, where you're coming from. Feel free to make comments and ask questions, and we'll do our best to incorporate that. But today we're going to blitz this out a little bit because we got a bunch of news and we want to make sure this is pretty highly encapsulated this week. All right. So the first story that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up this NVIDIA quarterly earnings. And I just presented this at the Voice and AI conference, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So this was a conference in Washington, D.C. And I presented this chart because I think a lot of people saw, oh yeah, NVIDIA had big earnings quarter a couple weeks ago, but they didn't really understand like how big it was. And what you can see here is that, they went all the way up to 13 billion, which is by far their biggest quarter ever for the 10 billion for the data center, 13 billion overall, by far their biggest quarter ever for the company, and basically half of all of their revenue from the previous fiscal year. Now they've got these fiscal years which are a little bit off, February to January, so hopefully that doesn't get too confusing. They're in fiscal year 2024 because it ends at the end of January now. But in any event, if we just look at 12 months or 4 quarters on a basis, this is what their revenue line looks like from a data center standpoint, from a gaming standpoint, from other. And you can see gaming had a really nice ramp up post COVID. That's fallen off a lot recently. It's been more than made up for from even in the recent quarters from data center work, and it's skyrocketed. And what is the reason for this? Why are people buying NVIDIA CPUs and GPUs? It's largely for these AI workloads, and that's what's happened. And I'll just say one other thing. That skyrocket in revenue is not the end of the story because they've already forecast next quarter, which will be at least 16 billion in revenue. So another 3 billion on top of this. Pretty significant. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point about what's driving it, it's both what's happening now and what's anticipated. And I think that combination is what's really making everything happen at such speed that the revenue and the potential revenue are just jumping off the board. I mean, there's a reason that both of us have made them our winner of the week multiple times.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So that's NVIDIA. And just a couple things about NVIDIA. They have new chips coming out very soon, which will keep that going. There is scarcity. I was just at this conference. I was talking to people who are using the H100s, their latest and greatest solution. There's a new announcement coming out later today. I know that we're going to show even better performance off of their existing chips using some software updates that they've made. But one of the key things that we've seen is most of the activity on these GPUs up to this point has been for training. And we're starting to see a significant ramp up in inference. Inference being the operational use of the models. It's not training the models, it's actually using them in production. And that's going to be something that's going to drive drive a lot of this activity. It also shows how much activity there is in the market. So I consider them a leading indicator for what's going to be happening going forward. Okay, let's keep moving on that. So just like keep track of NVIDIA because they are probably the most important company in the space. People think it's OpenAI, but maybe it's just NVIDIA. All right, so let's bring something else up that I talked to a lot of folks about this week, and that's this idea that the large language model wars are actually just proxy battles for the cloud wars. And I've mentioned that a couple times in Gain in the past. And I think it's just useful to like understand what's going on, because by looking at what's happening, we can understand their strategies, and it gives you a little sense of sort of where we're headed. So I did a preliminary on this at a private webinar a couple months ago, and it's evolved a little bit. But you can see is that we have the big cloud players, Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud, and then we have NVIDIA, which actually has its own cloud as well, which actually it's its own cloud, plus it runs on other clouds. There's a lot of different things going on with NVIDIA, which is really interesting. But what we have here is it gives you a sense of what large language models that they're working with. And you can see that Azure it's not a closed system, but you can use TII, you can use Meta, you can use Nemo, but it's really all roads lead to OpenAI at the moment, and that's really what they're pushing. It's not that you say you can't use the other ones, and TII is relatively new, about 4 weeks, 5 weeks on Azure, but really they're focused on this one thing. Whereas you see AWS has been signing up through Bedrock a lot of different large language model players, and kind of setting up the everything else strategy. Yeah, you go to Azure, it's not an actual, or it's an actual exclusive, but not a legal exclusive. Like OpenAI probably will show up in these other clouds eventually, but for now you have to go through Azure or direct to OpenAI. And if you don't want to use those, what can you use? Well, AWS is just saying, hey, we're going to sign up everything. And interestingly enough, Google was a little slow to sign up these others from Model Garden because they really focused on Palm and some of the others. Not to say they didn't have other offerings, but now what they're doing is they're replicating what AWS is doing and bringing on the same ones. And so we can actually just see what's going on in this space a little bit. And I think I have another image down here. Oh, actually, I don't. There's another image here that shows sort of the influence of NVIDIA, because NVIDIA actually envelops everything. But I just wanted to bring that up really quickly, because the cloud wars are primarily distribution, and this is why most enterprises are adopting it. Most of the software providers are adopting it. And so being on those and being available to developers and things like that winds up being very important. If you see a large language model that's not part of one of these clouds, you're going to have to bring it to the cloud yourself. And it's just like it's a different level of effort, different set of activities. And each of these cloud providers not only are providing this, because all they care about is just like more compute, more compute, more compute. Use our model, great. Use someone else's model, great. I don't care, right? More compute. But it's, in some ways, they're telling you who's going to be easy to adopt going forward. Should give you some indication of how big their market share is likely to be a year from now. Now, some of these won't even actually, some of the ones that are in here, I think, are going to still struggle. But if you're not on here, you've got a lot more work to do than the people who are on here.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say this was definitely predictable. If you remember back when when OpenAI first started showing off its LLMs, and it made at the time, a huge deal with Microsoft for billions of dollars, and for exclusivity, but not total exclusivity, specifically related to exactly this kind of thing in terms of enterprise and cloud availability. So I think that Microsoft saw LLMs and generative AI as exactly this, a part of their larger cloud war, and they were keen to get ahead in what turned out to be a very important part of that war.
Yeah. And so like one of the things we try to do here in Gain, we try to do in Synthedia, is like give context and like talk about some things that aren't just news, because there's just like a lot of news coming out. So that's what that's about. No one's really talking about it, but like hopefully, because you're watching this, you're reading Synthedia or VoiceBot, like you have this context to say, hey, watch what the cloud providers are doing, because they're having an undue influence on this market right now. Oh, also another way they're having influence is the software providers who are using their clouds. They're giving them cloud credits, so it's like cheaper to train and these other types of things. And so there's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes, which might not be obvious if you're not really embedded in the industry. And it might not be clear to you then, like how much influence they have right now, and then how much influence they're having in shaping enterprise buyers who are thinking about what they're going to adopt if they're going to do their own in a private cloud and those types of things. So I wanted to bring that up. Shout out to Jürgen Gravestein, joined us today. If you are here, do a couple quick things for me. If you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, just hit like, help us with that amazing algorithm. But and if you don't like it, I'm sorry, but please hit the like. If I think you're here, you probably like it, and let us know you're out there. Ask questions, make comments. We'd love to hear from you. Our second segment today, we're actually going to go into products. Usually we do funding fountain. We'll do funding fountain later, but I think that the bigger news really is some of the products that are out there. And I want to talk about Falcon 180B. You want me to take this one, or do you want to take this one?
Oh, I mean, I'm happy to. I mean, the short form is that the Technology Innovation Institute put out a large language model of 180 billion parameters. It's really, really big, and it's open to anyone, and really a power move from a relatively unknown player, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so some people may have seen that we talked about the Falcon 40B model, 40 billion parameter model. A couple of things I'll sort of lay out here about it. So that jumped to the top of the Hugging Face Open LLM leaderboard, the 40 billion, and then we had Llama 2 come along. We sort of eviscerated everybody, and now we have Falcon 180B, which actually it's 180 billion parameters, and it's doing better. But like a really key thing to keep in mind is it's trained on a lot more tokens, and that's one of the things that we've been looking at. A year ago, we were talking about parameters. Parameters were sort of the limiting factor often in terms of performance. But what we've seen recently is a lot of the performance gains haven't come from more parameters, although this model does have more parameters than its predecessor. It actually comes from more data. So the 40 billion model from TIA Falcon was trained on a trillion tokens. This one was trained on over 3 million tokens, and it's just much better. So the feature chart here that we're looking at right now shows the different Palm models, the original Palm, and then the Palm 2 small, medium, and large, and shows that the Falcon 180B, despite having fewer parameters than Palm 2, it's not really sure how many parameters are, but like the expectation is it's significantly higher than 180 billion. Is that it's performing about as well as the Palm large model, which is really interesting because that's like one of the highest performing proprietary models out there, Google's Palm. And it's doing better than the medium and small models. And being able to have comparable performance at a smaller model size really helps you because there's less, like, it costs less to fine tune, it costs less to run inference, less complexity in what you're trying to do. And then there's another chart here which shows how Falcon also is performing at a higher rate on the Hugging Face tests. Okay, so that is a set of tests. There might be some other tests you might find that some of these other models do better, but it's also outperformed Llama 2 by a bit. And I think that that's pretty significant. I will say one other thing about it. It's really interesting that this has come out. It's an open model, but not an open source model. They did open source the Falcon 40B. Actually, that originally came out as like a commercial licensable model, but I think 3 days after they launched it, they just turned it into an Apache 2. You do whatever you want with it as long as you do citations. This model is the 180B model is actually open source, but if you host an instance of it, then you don't have unlimited rights, and then you have to pay some sort of royalty, which is undefined. You have to like get permission from TII to do that. The way I read it is anyone who's just going to reoffer it, like cloud hosting providers, right? And this is actually something that I think is happening with Meta. I think if you're hosting Meta, Meta actually gets a little bit from the cloud providers on that. I'm not positive on that, but I think so based on something that was said. But clearly, it seems like that's the case with Falcon. And so if you want to do a third part, if you want to reoffer it, you want to basically set up your own cloud or use it within AWS and charge, you have to pay for that. The way I read the language, I think it's also if you're a SaaS provider using Falcon in the background, you also are probably hosting it in a way that'll be, I'm sure, more clear in the future. But in any event, it's an open model. Anyone can use it. It's open source, unless essentially you're charging a toll for people using that model, and then you have to pay them something, which is different than Meta, for example. Unless you're TikTok or someone like really giant, you don't have to pay anything. So that's also something I think it's interesting to know.
Yeah, and it's worth just noting that part of the reason for that is because Falcon comes out of essentially the United Arab Emirates from their government university, a public university. So there's not much mention about like how money was invested in terms of developing and training and so on. But it's a semi national government approach to generative AI, very different from some of the from the private approach that we've seen usually in the US and in Europe.
Yeah, definitely very interesting. Okay. So let's move into more products as we keep moving along here. You just wrote about a new generative AI tool from eBay. Tell me about that.
Yes. So this is basically eBay has been playing around with generative AI for a while in terms of generating text for listings, because that's often the friction point that prevents people from either joining or selling more things. Now their latest tool, essentially you share pictures of your product, and eBay's AI will not only write a description, but it will suggest a title, pull together details about the product that you might not even necessarily know, because it can has its own database for things like apparel and trading cards, and it's very much uh, the shortest distance between an idea and carrying out an idea that it's possible to have with generative AI, in terms of literally taking a picture and then eBay can handle
Right.
everything else and you sell something. So it's could very much be a model for future e-commerce, I would say.
Yeah, I think it reminds me of the Vimeo features that we talked about a little while ago. It reminds me of what we're seeing from Wix. Some of the others is basically they looked at the value chain, what their customers were doing, where there was friction in the process, and they're trying to reduce that, either to get them to use it more or to have them feel like they get more value out of it. Or in this case, if they don't do a product listing, then eBay can never make any money on the transaction. And so if they do the product listing, they have a chance. And so if you facilitate that, but I think there's this other level here, which is it'll be a better product listing. eBay probably knows that there's a lot of sellers out there who aren't that sophisticated yet. They can help up level their game. They can get more through the system. Those sellers then will do better, and they'll be more motivated to do more. And so it seems like, although it's hard to think of like eBay having a new flywheel, because I think they've sort of gotten to where they're going to get in a lot of ways, but it is a way for them to get more out of the fruit.
Yeah, and I should say it even goes as far as suggesting potential price, that, depending on how much the eBay knows about the product. If it's something like clothes or trading cards that has pretty good knowledge about it, can give you a good idea. And it's not that long ago there used to literally be stores or individuals who would sell things for you on eBay, because it's a hassle to go through and create all those little technical details, as well as writing descriptions, and paying someone to do it for you made sense. And it's not so common anymore, I think. But the idea that you have a bunch of clothes in your closet you want to get rid of, and you just literally take pictures of it and you're done, and then the money comes, you sell it out. I mean, that's appealing. I can see the value right there.
Absolutely. It's good. And we actually have a great question from Gautam James about the cloud providers. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, because I want to get through a couple of these product stories first. But it's sort of an interesting take on, or interesting question on that we actually didn't cover on that. Okay. Oh, and everybody out there, if you haven't been reading Synthedia, just go to bit.ly/Synthedia, because we do daily analysis of generative AI market every day, and then go to voicebot.ai. We've got news every day, some analysis. And actually, Eric's been publishing some sort of market data specific to generative AI every day on there. So check that out on voicebot.ai. All right. So next thing I want to talk about is you put up a story that we got a little bit of advanced notice about recently, but it became public finally this week. I think it was on Wednesday. HubSpot, just another software provider, a very large software provider to enterprises. They now have new tools that are generative AI based.
Yeah, and this goes back to what we were talking about before, in terms of not just eBay but Wix, and the idea of minimizing the effort and time between having an idea and having all the elements for that idea created. And for HubSpot, which does marketing, customer management systems, that means essentially coming up with prompts that can then put together not only websites, but marketing campaigns, content for social media, and going beyond that level to creating a generative AI chatbot that can help customers carry out those tasks, as well as work as the basis for customer management, for customer service for different companies that are using HubSpot. So it's really, they're really trying to bring generative AI into every aspect of their business, which includes a lot of companies out there and a lot of potential revenue from those clients that want to get into using generative AI to save money and to be more efficient.
Yeah, and I think for these companies, it's already gotten to the point where it's table stakes to have some of these things in their application, that they just don't have a choice anymore. That their competitors all have these capabilities; they have to have them too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we've talked before about how once upon a time the idea that every company needed a website and an email address was seen as unnecessary for a lot of businesses. But now, no matter what you're doing, generative AI has something to do that can help you. And for HubSpot, who wants to obviously keep customers and get new customers, this is going to be a part of their basic set of features for when they're looking to sign up new clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a little bit different from what we're seeing from 365 Copilot and Google Workspace with Duet AI, both of which are not just looking at this as retention or more use or more value. They're looking at it as more subscription dollars. So Duet AI, $30 per month additional. I'm not even sure if I know what 365 Copilot is additional, but it's basically, particularly if you're a small business, it's like it doubles the cost of what you're paying for Google Workspace. And we'll see, that might come down over time or whatever, but like they're looking at this and they're saying, hey, more value, I can get more money out of it. There's also more costs associated with it. Not that much more costs, but it makes sense. Whereas I think it's going to be harder for some of these other companies, like in the marketing services space, to charge more for it. I think they're just all going to have it.
Yeah, and if you're a company that uses HubSpot for marketing now and it's going well and you enjoy it, why would you make the extra effort to find something that might be better if HubSpot can say, oh, all those new features you're hearing about from other companies, we have that right within the same system you're used to and you're comfortable with.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to step back to eBay for just a moment. We just talked about that a moment ago. You guys can, if you just joined, you can look at the recording and see, but there's a couple of quick questions about it, or a couple of comments. One question, and maybe you can answer this, Eric. I'm curious to know if eBay's AI will help differentiate your description or write-ups to help you stand out against other people selling similar products.
I think to the extent that it will mark where it might be something in particularly good condition or particularly rare, perhaps. But from what I've seen from the demos and a couple of people experimenting with it, it looks like you're going to get the basic facts, the basic details, and any relevant information in there. But that's why it's not going to just post it without you getting a chance to look at it. You can add in your superlatives and your extra bits and so on. And that otherwise, yeah, I mean, I agree it would be a mistake there, but it's writing all that basic things that I think is the biggest impediment toward selling on eBay, is that you don't want to have to keep writing all the basic stuff rather than maybe boasting about how great it is and why everyone should buy it. That's a different kind of skill set, I think.
There's this comment that generative AI is not going to take your job, but someone using generative AI is going to take your job from you. And I think this is really also apropos here, that it might be better than you. Maybe if you're a very experienced seller, maybe it's not better than you, but using it might be better than you would be. It's probably better than other people that are not using it. But at some point it'll probably revert to the mean, and that it'll be like everybody will be using the same tools. And so then it'll probably up level everybody. Maybe it'll make it more competitive. So if you're an underperforming seller, it probably makes your life better. If you're an overperforming seller, now you have more competition because it's easier for people who don't know what you know to be effective. That would be my guess.
Not to mention, just purely on a linguistic level, all of the people who are maybe not proficient in English or it's a second language, and suddenly they have a baseline of competent English to build on. That if people were unsure of buying from someone who maybe had some errors in how they wrote, but otherwise were fine, suddenly all those potential issues are gone. So.
Yeah, exactly. And great question, Gerald. I think thanks for bringing us back to that. Paul Sweeney also had a comment about this. He's basically said, along the idea of eBay, take a picture and everything else is automated and optimized, right? Reduce that friction. Pretty compelling. How long before Tinder does the same thing I think somebody is doing that, aren't they? Didn't you
There,
write about
there
something along those
are,
lines?
yeah, there are variations on that theme. Less about taking a picture and then writing a description of a person, but certainly about putting in bullet points or very basic details about yourself, and then having that turn into uh, a fuller like paragraph or two about who you are, and definitely a lot of interest in using generative AI images to compare successful, like what does a good dating app image picture look like, and giving ideas about which pictures you submit that you should use or which you shouldn't, and what you can do to make them better. And there's a lot of that there. Not to mention all of the, I mean, we briefly touched on it, and honestly, it's a bigger story that we don't cover too much because there's some seedy elements. But the generative AI girlfriends and boyfriends
Yeah.
scene, there's questionable elements, but some people are using it as purely social interaction practice, and I think that that's actually going to affect how people talk to each other in the future.
Yes, and how we discern what the facade is. And I think,
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
past, it might be that when we didn't have digital, when we lived in an analog world, we would basically judge the book by the cover. What clothes are they wearing? What car are they driving? Now we look at like how many followers they have or what they post, what they've done in their past. And, from a LinkedIn standpoint, we publish the resumes. But yeah, it is, I wonder if it leads to like mass commoditization. But really what it's going to be is it's going to lead to everyone who's below average is going to come up. So the average is going to rise, but the people who are already excelling at this will probably just excel more. And actually, I think there's going to be even a more rarefied area because not everyone's going to learn how to use these things effectively. We have another comment from Dave Garbino about eBay. Boy, this is like rolling. The difference will be in prompting and better writing skills versus poor prompting. And this is exactly great. So I was making a similar point.
Yep.
It's like if you're good at prompting, you'll be good at this.
Well, it's like if you're good at taking photos, you're going to sell better than not, and if you're good at writing a prompt, then you're going to sell more things. It's totally there.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dave and Paul, for those comments. And thanks, Jurgen. We were just wondering, we couldn't remember what Microsoft 365 Copilot was, also $30 a month. So Duet AI is their Copilot. Microsoft has a Copilot, $30 a month extra. Everyone else might try to charge for it, but I'm not sure they'll be able to. Okay, let's move on. Going to keep this going. Lots of news today. Intuit, they have their assistant, and you wrote about this, TurboTax and MailChimp.
Yes, it's funny. I always call it Intuit, and now I guess Intuit is Intuit in terms of generative AI, because they've been playing around with using it for producing text for MailChimp campaigns, but now they've gone the length of creating a generative AI chatbot for not only MailChimp but also the other brands they own, like TurboTax and some accounting, Credit Karma, QuickBooks. Now you can use these generative AI chatbots to ask questions, to find out information through any databases they're connected to. It's again the idea about a lot of people have a huge amount of information at their fingertips, but they struggle maybe to figure out where to get the information they need at that moment, or what information is most relevant. And that's where these chatbots come in handy. And I think that a lot of people doing their own accounting or small businesses are going to rely on these in a way that we haven't seen before.
So large language models in particular have gotten a lot of people excited and these types of things. Some people know that ChatGPT is actually called internally, like in the code, it's like called an assistant. I was just at a conference where a lot of people have built assistants, and we've talked about that a lot. It's kind of like the old thing in computing, it's turtles all the way down, it's assistants all the way down. And I've talked to some people who have a background in this, particularly with this solution. Small businesses, they need small business founders who don't have all the resources of these big companies. They need an assistant. They need an expert. And maybe that expert's around tax. Maybe it's around marketing or something like that. But they actually need something to trust to reduce the time they have to take to learn like every domain, every discipline, because they don't have scale in all these different areas. Yeah. And it's really interesting because the company is relied upon by so many small business owners. They use it for their back office. And that's an area where many of them, like finance, accounting, HR, they don't have a lot of experience. They're not really depth. So they're always learning on the go. So that's good. But then it can move into these other areas, marketing, strategy, these other things. Like it's an expert in a box for helping entrepreneurs to be more successful. I think it's a really compelling concept. I don't know if they'll be successful executing it ultimately, but it's potentially a very large market.
Yeah, and it's the difference between a chatbot now, which you can describe your company, and it can give you some suggestions on how to best do your taxes, and do the best you can with what you have. But versus an AI that can very, very quickly analyze all of your tax details and give you very specific suggestions about deductions or tax breaks you might go for. It could make or break a lot of businesses that live on the margins of their profit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this could be really compelling. I hope the execution is as good as what it looks like they're heading towards, but we'll see. I mean, these things, what we know from the past, working in AI for over a decade now, it's that the ideas are very hard to bring to market sometimes, in the right user interface, and the right capabilities for the right users. And so I'm hopeful though. Hey, everybody, this is the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this every week, usually on Thursdays. Next week, we'll be here Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern, our normal time. We're a little bit late this week because we're on the road and everything, but wow, what a week. So we're trying to get through a lot of it pretty quickly so you guys can get back to your day. If you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, please give us a like. Subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you're on LinkedIn, you feel free to give me a follow. Just let me know that you watch Gain or something like that, so I know to differentiate you from all the people trying to sell me Google Voice accounts. And we really appreciate you being here, make comments, all that good stuff. Okay. So another product announcement we saw this I can't remember, was this week or was it the end of last week? It's been recent. And this is Zoom. So I think this was just like a couple days ago, right?
Yeah.
They changed the name of their solution.
Yeah, they were very much on the leading edge of involving generative AI in a lot of their products, especially for businesses. Then there was a bit of a kerfuffle because of questions about whether information produced by their generative AI chatbots and other tools could be used for further training, and whether that would involve any private information. And there was a lot of very upset people online, including some fairly major figures in different businesses. And so they quickly rewrote their terms of service for that, and now have decided to just go ahead and replace what they were calling Zoom IQ, and now they're just referring to it as their AI companion. And it does basically what Zoom IQ did, but with also more. So honestly, it makes Zoom into Slack to a certain extent in terms of encouraging
Yes.
chat online, and combining not just your meetings, your talking to other people, but also their messaging back and forth, and calendars and so on, and offering prompts and suggestions. It's a lot more proactive, which is something that people often want with their business communications. So it could be very helpful for them. Although again, they're still recovering from a bit of a PR issue.
Yeah, and I don't know what that does. It certainly doesn't help them, the PR issue. I think that this is Zoom wants to be something that they're not. Like everyone likes them for video conferencing. They want to be then Microsoft Teams and like Slack and all these other types of things. They're also like thinking that they could be that assistant for the business or for businesses. And to a certain extent, like they're just introducing useful features. So they should so for example, if I join late, it'll give me a summary in the sidebar of what's already been said. Isn't that amazing? I mean, there's some really good things. So they have all these aspirations which they spend a lot of time talking about, which I have little confidence that they'll actually get to, but they still are using it for things that are useful. And actually, I talked to a couple of executives in very large companies this week and asked them about this, and they were sort of chuckling. They're like no one's going to throw away Slack or Teams or any of these things to start using it. And look at Salesforce. Salesforce wanted to be that too. In order to get there, they had to buy Slack, right? In order to get in there. It's very hard for companies to get out of their lane once they're known about some things. Paul Sweeney said there's a new paper out today that says LLM-generated prompts across the board are outperforming handcrafted prompts. Well, of course that's true. For the most part, because that's like collective wisdom, and most people don't know anything about prompting. I would say that for specific use cases, I've seen that generated prompts, if you try that, are not as good as some of the ones for people who are really good at this. Like, for example, someone I know very well has created over 30,000 images on Midjourney. she really knows how to get that thing to do what she wants it to do. And I think in some cases probably could outperform, but in other cases probably needs us. And I think that that's really an interesting thing. But like, maybe what we just need is we need people to become expert at asking the machines for how to do better prompts to make them do what you want. But it was a really good point. Just a little sidebar there for Paul. So thanks for sharing that new Hugging Face paper. It's interesting. I did want to talk about one other thing here. The ever elusive Apple. Apple's good for headlines. I see it too. Like we write stories about Apple sometimes, not as often as most people. People like to read about Apple, and basically they're saying, hey, you know what? Super secret stuff. John G. and Andrea went there a few years ago. We wrote about that. We thought it might be very significant. Not much has come out of them that has been seen by the public. There might be some things that are sort of back end issues that they're using some of these technologies. Oh, we've been building a large language model for 4 years. We talked about Apple GPT a few weeks ago and stuff like that. We have amazing distribution. This is going to be the thing. It's going to boost the industry. I don't believe it for a second. It's not that I contest that they've been building something, because like I do know, like they have been. Like I think that's verified. And it's not to say that that they might not have some really nice features coming out that iPhone users will love, or iPhone lovers will use. Maybe we could talk about it that way. But it doesn't convince me that this is going to change the market at all.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think the original report referred to Apple being prescient in terms of setting up that task force 4 years ago, and it's like, okay, well, yes, it was prescient 4 years ago, and then within the last year,
well, wait a second.
Done nothing.
It was prescient. It was prescient 4 years ago, but Google launched the attention is all you need. The Tensor paper came out in 2017. That was 6 years ago. And then they launched BERT 5 years ago. I mean, these were all before. Like even then, it wasn't prescient. They were already playing catch up.
And the fact that, I mean, remember, like same thing was going on with Google. Google's been working on this since 2016, 2017. And when they realized that now it was a public battle or a public race, they immediately jumped on it. I mean, with some mistakes along the way, but the fact is that they very quickly, if not caught up in terms of mindshare compared to OpenAI, certainly caught up in terms of product and availability, whereas Apple will be starting from well behind that point. Even if they announced a huge suite of products tomorrow, that doesn't mean suddenly everyone's using them.
Yeah, and it's not going to, I'm expecting them to talk a little bit about it next year, but mostly if there's something significant, it's going to be June of 2025. So just wait. Maybe I'll be wrong. I don't know. Maybe they're ready.
Yeah, it's just, but also they have such a lockdown, like iPhones and that whole system there is such a huge safe base for them that they probably feel like they can afford to be cautious in a way that Google maybe didn't.
I think you mean it's an ATM. They just pull money out of it. I mean,
like they could do nothing else but make new iPhones every couple of years, and shareholders would probably be at least content, if not thrilled.
It's often what they do. Okay, so I do want to, before we go into Funding Fountain, we have a couple stories there before we wrap up today. And we do have winners and losers of the week, folks. If you think you know who, or believe who is the winner or the loser this week in generative AI, please throw it in the chat. There was this question about the cloud discussion. So I understand the cloud providers can't keep up with demand. This is the first story we talked about, or maybe the second story we talked about today. If they can't get enough NVIDIA chips, then where does that leave everyone else? Any thoughts when, if that pressure will ease up? So I guess a couple things. So we've had some briefings from NVIDIA. We sort of see some things that are coming out. I also had the opportunity to talk to some people who are this week who are using NVIDIA chips and through cloud providers and like how hard it is. Yes, there is a scarcity of chips. I heard someone saying that like NVIDIA was jacking up the price of their chips. I don't know if there's any evidence of that, but they haven't been discounting because there aren't enough. And they are the most efficient by a significant margin, even though they might be a little bit more expensive. Well, actually, in many cases, a lot more expensive. But because they can actually, their performance is so much higher, in a lot of time, if you're doing anything on a large scale, I think the TCO, total cost of ownership, actually is pretty favorable. So where does that leave everybody? There could be some scarcity, but I've also seen a lot of creative things. Like I know people who are running on, there's a lot of organizations who are doing things on the older chips like the A100s, which are not as in short supply as the H100s. Eric and I saw some data just recently about some of the GPUs, which are actually down the stack a little bit more in terms of performance. And what they've been doing is actually investing in some software upgrades, which actually will come out, I think, in 20 minutes or so, at least new software upgrades, which are basically doubling the performance of all the old chips. So there's a lot of AI workloads that are now going to the most advanced NVIDIA chips, which I think can actually be brought down to some of the lower end chips. And then you've got Google TPUs also, which are sort of like, I think normally fit in performance mid-range of NVIDIA chips, like not as good as the high end. And then you've got the Trainium and Inferentia chips from Amazon, which they're pushing out, which I think are also those. So there's just, I think what we're looking at, yes, there is a bit of a crunch right now. It is hard for people to get this. Sometimes it will delay products coming to market. I don't know as we go to more inference how it's going to impact availability in terms of and quality of service for these types of things. But what I'm seeing is that there's opportunities now to actually use some of the less performant chips to make up for this in the near term until we get everything sorted over the next 9 months.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
there. Yeah. No, I was gonna say I agree. I think NVIDIA is just dominates in such a huge way that it blocks out almost anything else. But there are other things happening underneath that surface.
Okay, folks, let's go on to funding found. We just have a couple stories this week. Contex.ai raised $3.5 million. Generative AI analytics. I've talked to a couple of companies in this space. Tell us about Context.
Yeah, so the idea is that it's not just about building a product or even building a good product. It's about trying to understand how it's helping you or where it's helping you the most. So what they're wanting, what Context.ai does is analyze how businesses are using large language models and giving a sense of where it's performing well. Is a customer service that there's a lot of demand that's doing well, or elsewhere in a business, and helping figure out even before you build a new product with an LLM where you should focus your resources. If it should be a chatbot, if it should be any other the other many ways to use LLM. So I think understanding that generative AI is good for a business is one thing, but understanding how best to implement it, I think, is where companies like Context.ai are going to be very appealing.
I did a value chain analysis just a little while ago. It's sort of looking at, okay, so if you look at generative AI, if it's going to get adopted across the enterprise, how is that going to get adopted? What are the steps? And so those of us who've been in the technology industry for a long time, we sort of understand there's different steps that people go through, and they do research. They do some sort of benchmark or evaluation. Then they do a selection. Then they do a development, and then they do monitoring, improvement, all these other types of things. And the tooling space, there is some tooling around LLMs in particular. There's not as much, which is scaled up to the application layer. And some people will think, oh, I can just use Datadog, or I can use New Relic or something that I'm already using. Maybe. And all those companies have announced something from time to time, but very often not, because they don't actually, they're not looking at the things that you want. And so, yes, this is just another part of tooling, another part of the value chain, which hasn't been an issue now because there's just not a lot of production systems out there. And so if you have one, you ought to build your own dashboard by necessity. But everyone else coming up, they're just going to expect there to be tooling like this so that they can, manage their infrastructure or their application more effectively, understand how it's working, make sure they're fixing problems. So I expect to see a lot more of this. Now, you had another story today, or maybe this was yesterday. I don't remember when this was. It was recently, September 7th. Okay, so we'll call that yesterday. Ello, tell us about that. They just raised $15 million.
Yeah, so they're part of this. Even before generative AI really took off, there was growing interest in applying educational models, or applying AI models to education, and Ello was one of them, specifically for teaching kids how to read by creating sort of personalized tutors that would not only sort of guide a child learning how to read, but give them advice on sort of understanding what they're reading, and even use a sort of interest quiz to figure out what books they should learn to read with, so that they can be engaged with what they're learning and become more literate. And they just raised $15 million, and one of the things that they're interested in is implementing generative AI. They haven't said anything specific about it, but we're already starting to see how generative AI can be a more responsive educational assistant in terms of not only helping a student, but also putting together analysis of what they're learning, how well they're learning, where they need help. Companies like Lura and OpenAI is also working with Duolingo on something similar. I think that as this sort of first flush of generative AI funding continues, you're going to see a lot more focus on places where AI has been involved already, but now this next level of LLMs can really enhance what they're already doing.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. And I think anytime you hear a company that just said they raised money and they don't give you details on generative AI, but they sort of hint that they have something, that was part of their pitch. Like they've already thought through it. Doesn't mean they have the capability yet. Doesn't even mean their idea was a good one yet. It just means that yes, they're raising money and maybe they'll put it into marketing and sales to like sort of grow their core product. But every one of them is putting something into R&D in order to add some of these features. So I would definitely keep an eye out for that. And in education, it's a good time of year to talk about education, for a lot of folks, because like historically a new semester in a lot of parts of the world, just started, or a new quarter, whatever thing that they do. Okay. I should have shown my chart around interest in ChatGPT and generative AI, how that like spiked as soon as school was back in session. But that's for another day. We've been doing a lot of stuff on data. It's like fun. So another story that I want to hit on, I think this before we get to winners and losers, might be the last one. OpenAI just announced a developer conference, and I was talking to someone at OpenAI, and they're like, just getting hammered. Like, how do I get an invite? And it's like you actually have to sign up to just express interest. Essentially, they're just basically saying, "Hey, we're going to bring everyone together in San Francisco in November. Let us know if you would be interested in attending." And of course, like, there's kind of a frenzy because they're like the center of all activity, or like all mind share anyway right now. And so like someone who's working is like, I don't even know. It's like he's like, I don't even know if I'm going to be invited to go because we don't know what it is yet. So it's like so freaking brilliant. They did this before, and they said, "Oh, would you want to use ChatGPT Plus, like for all the ChatGPT users? Would you want to use it, and how much would you pay for it if you were using it?" And so they use that data to actually craft like what the features would be, who would do it, how much what the pricing should be for ChatGPT Plus. If they're just saying, "Hey, we're thinking about throwing a developer conference in San Francisco. How many of you would actually like to come?" And then they can sort of see who's coming. And so it's going to be sort of a semi-invite only, or maybe an invite only event is what it looks like.
There'll be some live streaming, it looks like, which is probably good. Otherwise, people just be battering down the walls to get in, apparently. But it's notable that Sam Altman, the OpenAI CEO, did explicitly say that they're not going to be announcing GPT-5, so it's not going to be
Thank you.
I suspect it'll be a lot more focus on these different verticals and different ways of implementing their existing LLMs and some of their other products too. I mean, that are related to it. They've been doing a lot with Whisper, their text-to-speech API, things like that. So I think it'll be as big and as broad as they want it to be, and regardless of what those choices are, it'll be full and with potentially internet crashing levels of streamers.
And let's keep in mind too, this is going to be developer focused. It's going to be about the API product, probably more so. Not to say they wouldn't talk about like ChatGPT Enterprise or something like that, maybe just, but it's not. That's not going to be the focus. The focus is on people who are building new products.
No, but and that's true. But the last few years, I think, Brett, you and I have seen it repeatedly that even the most technical developer focused conferences, if it's a company that people are interested in, it doesn't matter. They have to address the fact that there's a ton of non-technical people interested, at least in the keynote, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fair to say. And by the way, if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, you might want to. It's YouTube, just the VoiceBot. And I think it's /@VoiceBot AI. Do that. I actually have some excerpts of video capture of a presentation that I observed from an OpenAI executive, and he talked about new features that haven't been announced yet. So I was just going to like bring it to people. I'll do that over the weekend in Synthedia probably, or in Synthedia and on our YouTube channel. So I think a lot of people should see that. It's like interesting the direction they're heading. They've learned a lot. Also, by the way, it's like that thing's like if you don't know, it's $60 a month that they're charging people. There are a lot of people who are signing. A lot of companies are signing up for that $60 a seat per month, and it has a lot more features and a lot better. And one of the things, like people talk about GPT-5, GPT-4 has got a huge latency problem right now, so it actually isn't appropriate for a lot of use cases, even though it's like the quality is really exceptional. So they're working on making GPT-4 more performant. And in fact, one of the notable announcements associated with ChatGPT Enterprise is that it's actually twice as fast. GPT-4 is in ChatGPT Enterprise versus the consumer edition. And so that's going to open up new use cases as well. And so, Altman said, like, don't expect GPT-5 anytime this year. He said that months and months ago. He also said that about GPT-4. People were saying that was going to come early. It didn't. And it sort of came when he never indicated specifically, but he's like, don't wait. But he didn't like deny that it would be sort of first half of 2023. So yeah, GPT-5 best case is next year. So like, don't worry about that. We aren't even using GPT 3.5 to its fullest benefit. There's a lot of runway there. That thing's really fast and it's a lot less expensive to run. So people should be looking at that first. Okay, Eric, winners and losers of the week. What do you want to start out with? Winners or losers?
I guess if I had to pick a winner, I mean, obviously it's very easy to say NVIDIA once again, but I'm actually going to say the people who have to manage companies and offices, the ones who organize meetings and so on, because not only did Zoom come out with their new features, but Slack has done a whole revamp that's very, very much centered on encouraging use of generative AI. And I think that there's going to be a lot more integration of those tools into how offices are run. And for the people who have to be the ones that actually talk to executives, their job is probably going to be a lot easier, hopefully.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. So winners this week for me, it's hard not to say OpenAI because I know how much interest there is in that product. And we just talked about a couple of weeks ago, people are saying, oh, OpenAI, it's spending too much money. They're not generating any revenue. And we showed some evidence that suggests they're probably making $500 million a year. We saw some other things. People say their run rate is $1 billion a year. And that's before ChatGPT Enterprise. So I think that's really good. I would say that I'm actually pretty heartened by the developer or by the cloud, both Google Cloud and Amazon also providing more access to third-party models. I think that's really good for developers. But I would say that OpenAI is probably the big winner this week. Because we had the information last week, but now I'm starting to hear like people buying it, and it's kind of like that product that flies off the shelf. So it's just going to be a flood of cash, and it's going to give them more advantage. Okay, who do you have for loser this week?
I'm going to have to say musicians, unfortunately, because not only did the viral AI-generated music creator ghostwriter come out with yet another song that's doing just as well, if not better, than the songs from actual musicians. But Warner Music has signed up a virtual pop singer, an AI pop singer who's entirely digital from voice to appearance. And it may be that this is, if not going to take over the music industry, then at least make it even harder for the classic starving musician to make it into the big time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was talking to somebody who provides technology to the media industry this week, and like how the SAG strike and all these things are coming about, and it's really interesting what's going on with artists in this space. Maybe that's for another day. That's another day. I think it's super fascinating. But one thing I will say is I actually think that if you're not OpenAI or a couple other folks, my loser, and I think it's a temporary loss, but my loser this week is actually all these people who are adding generative AI features to their software packages, which people are yawning at now because it's like, oh yeah, I've seen that everywhere. but also to a lot of these software companies who think that they're going to sell new subscriptions because of this. Whereas we're seeing some of the friction that we talked about creeping into the corporate buying cycle. Oh, I don't have AI governance set yet. I don't have strategy. I don't have tooling. I don't know how to monitor these apps. And all those things are actually, the summer created a little bit of a pause, and there's going to be a frenzy over the next 6 weeks. I could tell you what's going on. But a lot of the people that thought they were going to land really big software, generative AI software deals like this month are not. Maybe it'll be November or December, but it's going to be delayed a few months because the enterprises right now still don't know how to absorb this or make that big commitment. So that's something we're tracking very closely. Oh, and I should do one more thing. So that's winners and losers of the week, but I do want to do a quick shout out to Pete Erickson, the Modev crew put on the Voice and AI conference this week. It was fantastic. We had a lot of really senior people there, but we had a lot of frontline practitioners, and it was 400 or 500 people altogether. It was in Washington, D.C., but these are people that are actually doing work. Like, they're using generative AI, they're using conversational AI, and you can see that a few of them are exploding right now, and that's in a good way. So it's like rocket ship going off. That maybe some are blowing up too, but a few of them are actually on the precipice. They see like optimism going forward and like really positive sales pipelines. A couple of them are actually just getting a lot more business than they've ever seen before, a lot more activity before. So I think shout out to Pete for bringing everyone together, a lot of these real innovators, but plus it's not just buyers, but it's like practitioners, like just talking about what's actually working in the space. And like Roger Kibbe just showing like how you can run an LLM on your laptop. Basically, a version of Llama 2 on your laptop, and like how that could show like edge computing and like all these other type of innovations. Ryan Steelberg from Veritone has like a really interesting new framework around human in the loop, human on the loop, human out of the loop. So there was some good thought leadership there as well. Walmart made a really interesting presentation. I'll have more coming up on the VoiceBot YouTube channel on that as well, around what they're doing in conversational AI and generative AI, which is coming up later. Just shout out to Pete Erickson, Modev community, for bringing everyone together, because I learned a lot. It was great to see a lot of people in the community and to see not just activity, but learning and what people are being able to share.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that says it all. And also, I mean, the idea that the things are stable or done changing quickly now is very, very silly. Obviously, anyone who's been watching this, I think everything's going to look entirely different in 2 months from where we are even now.
Yeah, it should make everyone here feel better too. If you feel like you're behind, everyone that I talked to, even the people who were doing cutting edge stuff, felt like they were behind. They can't keep up with it. It's just like sort of the way it is when we go through these waves. When you're in the middle of it, it's hard to keep up. But there's a lot going on, a lot of reasons for optimism. I'm Brett Kinsella. This is the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this every week. That's Eric Schwartz. Sign up for Synthedia. Read voicebot.ai. We have a new LinkedIn newsletter, which just gives you links of different articles to read each week. You can find that in my profile, Brett Kinsella, on LinkedIn. Keep track, but come back, make comments. Thank you, everybody, for making comments today and joining us and asking questions. It makes this a richer experience. Until next week, everybody. Bye-bye.